Glass shattered at his boots, whiskey spreading dark across the planks, but he didn't look down. He couldn't. The woman standing at the top of the train steps had frozen him where he stood, breath locked in his chest, heart pounding like a warning shot he'd learned too late to ignore. This was not the woman he had imagined, not the one he had ordered. And as her eyes found his, steady and unafraid, he understood with sudden, sinking clarity that whatever life he had been trying to keep buried had just stepped off the train and was looking straight at him. 3 months earlier, Caleb Mercer had sworn he would never do something this desperate, yet here he was. The decision had been made on a night when the wind screamed through the cracks of his mountain cabin, and the silence pressed so hard it felt like hands on his throat. He had sat alone at his rough table, lamplight flickering over scars time hadn't softened, a blank page daring him to admit the truth. He was tired of eating alone. Tired of waking to memories that didn't fade with daylight. Tired of talking only to horses and ghosts. So he wrote. He kept the words plain. No lies. No promises he couldn't keep. He asked for a quiet woman. A woman who could cook, keep house, and mind her own past. In return, he offered a roof that didn't leak too badly, steady meals, and his name for protection. Romance was not included. Hope was not mentioned. He sealed the letter with wax and didn't allow himself to think about it again. Until the telegram came. Now he stood on the narrow platform of Pine Ridge Station, coat pulled tight against a late winter wind, a flask in his hand he hadn't realized he was lifting. Folks nearby pretended not to stare, but they did. They always did when Caleb came down from the ridge. Some remembered him from years back. Others only knew the rumors. The train arrived with a scream of metal and steam. Passengers spilled out. Salesmen. Ranch hands. A preacher and his wife. Caleb waited, jaw set, eyes scanning without hope. Then she appeared. She paused at the doorway of the passenger car, like someone stepping into a fight they had already survived once. She wore a black dress that had known better days, gloves too thin for the cold, and a bonnet pulled low. Her face was pale, composed, and utterly unreadable, and at her throat, the scar caught the light, a pale, deliberate line, impossible to miss. The bottle slipped from Caleb's fingers and shattered at his feet. She descended the steps with careful grace, carrying a single worn carpet bag. When her boots touched the platform, the murmurs began. He heard them even as his blood roared in his ears. That's her, the one from back east. Trouble follows women like that. She walked straight toward him. Up close, her eyes were the color of a storm, held back by will alone. Not broken, not pleading, just watchful, knowing. "Mr. Mercer," she said, voice low and steady. "I assume." He nodded, suddenly aware of everything about himself. The untrimmed beard, the patched coat, the smell of smoke and whiskey clinging to him like a confession. "Mrs. Hale," he managed. "Not for long," she replied softly. "I hope." Silence stretched. The wind kicked snow across the boards. She did not shiver. "Do you have a wagon?" she asked. He did. He lifted her carpet bag and was startled by how light it was. A life reduced to what could be carried. He understood that better than he cared to admit. As they left the platform, eyes followed them. A storekeeper stepped out to stare. A woman pulled her children close. Even the saloon windows went quiet. Mrs. Hale kept her chin high, gaze forward, a practiced stillness about her that spoke of long lessons learned. At the wagon, her gloved fingers trembled when she took his hand, just once, just enough for him to see. The road climbed fast once the town fell away. Snow thickened. Pines closed in. The world narrowed to the creak of leather and the steady pull of horses. "They talked on the train," she said at last. "They assumed I couldn't hear." He waited. "Does it matter to you," she asked, turning to face him, "what they say about me?" Caleb considered the question carefully. He had heard things. He wasn't a fool. Stories traveled, even this far west. "I reckon most folks come out here to leave something behind," he said. "Seems wrong to judge which things deserve burying." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. The snow began to fall harder. Without thinking, he shrugged out of his coat and handed it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it, fingers brushing his wrist. "Thank you," she said. Something like warmth flickered across her face and vanished just as fast. The cabin came into view at dusk. Dark wood against white mountains. Isolated. Honest. "It ain't much," he said, suddenly defensive. She looked at it, then at him. "It's enough," she said quietly. Inside she moved slowly, touching nothing without purpose. Clean, sparse, disciplined. A place built to survive, not to comfort. "You can take the room," he said. "I'll stay out here." She nodded. "Until it's official." That night, long after the fire burned low, he woke to the sound of his own voice, shouting names he hated knowing. When he came back to himself, she was there, wrapped in a shawl, eyes steady in the dim light. "You're safe," she said gently. "It was just a dream." Quote, "They sat together at the table, sharing bitter coffee while the mountain slept. No explanations, no questions. When dawn came, it found two strangers under the same roof, bound by an agreement neither fully understood yet. And somewhere between fear and quiet, something fragile had begun. Morning came softly, like it was unsure of its welcome. Caleb woke before the light reached the cabin, lying still on the pallet near the fire, listening. The wind had eased. Snow rested heavy on the roof. And somewhere beyond the wall, he could hear movement that was not his own. She was awake. That knowledge settled in his chest in a way he didn't expect. Not fear, not discomfort, just awareness. By the time he rose, she had already coaxed the stove to life. The smell of coffee drifted through the room, sharp and grounding. She stood with her back to him, sleeves rolled, hair pinned tight beneath her bonnet, even indoors, as if habit refused to loosen its grip. "You didn't have to," he said. "I agreed to cook," she replied without turning. "Seems best to begin as I mean to continue." Quote, he poured water into the basin, washed his hands, and watched her work from the corner of his eye. Her movements were practiced, efficient, no wasted motion. A woman who had learned to do things properly because mistakes cost too much. They ate in silence. Hot biscuits, salt pork, simple, filling. After, she washed the dishes while he split wood just outside the door. The mountain air bit at his lungs, but the rhythm steadied him. Chop, stack, breathe. When he came back in, she had moved slowly through the cabin, taking it in the way one measured risk. "You live alone far up here," she said, "by design." "I understand that." He glanced at her then. She wasn't looking at him. Her eyes rested on an old photograph near the mantel. Men in uniform, faces faded. "You were married once," she said gently. He nodded. 15 years back. Fever." "I'm sorry." "So am I." The words were plain. Enough. That night, the wind returned with teeth. It rattled the walls, slipped through the gaps between logs, and carried with it the sound of something wild moving far off. Caleb lay awake long after the fire burned down, staring into the dark. When the dream took him, it was sudden. Shouting, "Smoke!" The sound of men calling orders that made no sense anymore. He woke choking on it, hands on his shoulder, a voice low and steady. "Caleb!" He blinked, breath ragged, heart slamming against his ribs. She stood beside him, wrapped in a shawl, barefoot on the cold floor. "You were dreaming," she said. "You're here." He sat up slowly, shame creeping in behind the fear. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she said. "I was already awake." She moved to the stove and stirred the coals back to life. He watched her pour coffee, the quiet competence of it, the lack of fear. They sat together at the table, steam curling between them. "I used to walk at night," she said softly, "when sleep felt dangerous." He nodded. Different ghosts, same hours. They drank in silence until the sky began to pale. By the 4th day they had found a rhythm. She rose early. He tended the animals. They worked without speaking much, but there was no strain in it, just space shared carefully. That morning, The sound of horses reached her first. She was kneading dough when she heard it. Hooves, more than one. Close. Caleb, she called quietly. He stepped out with the axe still in his hand. 3 riders approached. A man in clerical black, a sharp-faced woman beside him, and a younger man riding slightly behind, eager eyes flicking everywhere at once. The preacher dismounted first. "Mr. Mercer," he called, voice warm, eyes cold. "Reverend Collins, we've come to welcome your guest." "My intended," Caleb said flatly. The woman sniffed. "From back east, we hear." Mrs. Hale stepped onto the porch then. She did not smile, did not flinch. The scar at her throat caught the morning light. "Good morning," she said. "To what do we owe the visit?" The Reverend cleared his throat. "Concern. When someone with a history joins a community, it's our duty to ensure proper conduct." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. "You can say what you've got to say in front of her," he said. The woman's mouth thinned. "People like her bring trouble." "Mrs." Hale's voice stayed even. "People like me?" The Reverend raised a hand. "We don't want misunderstandings, only clarity." "You have it," Caleb said. "She's staying. We'll be married within the week." "And after that," he added, "any man or woman who speaks ill of my wife answers to me." Silence fell. The woman gasped. The young man shifted. The Reverend gathered his reins. "You'll find this town slow to forget." "I reckon I'll manage," Caleb replied. They rode off. Mrs. Hale leaned against the rail once they were gone, breath leaving her in a quiet rush. "Well," she said, "that was efficient." "It won't be the last," he said. "I know." That evening she barely touched her food. "You want to tell me?" he asked finally. She stood and moved to the window. "You said no questions." "I did, but maybe some things don't stay buried." She was quiet for a long moment. "He hurt me," she said at last. "For years." Caleb didn't move. "The night he died," she continued, "he meant to finish it." Her hand rose to her throat. "I survived." Quote, he crossed the room and stopped a step away. "Good," he said simply. She turned then, surprise flickering across her face. "You don't ask for more?" "No." Something in her softened. Later, when the fire burned low, she spoke again. "Do you regret sending for me?" He shook his head. "I think," he said slowly, "I needed someone who wouldn't be afraid of the dark." She met his gaze. "So did I." Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, 2 people sat in shared silence, neither alone anymore, both knowing the quiet would not last. Trouble had noticed them, and it would come back. Trouble came riding in on a clear afternoon, bold as if it had every right to be there. Mrs. Hale heard the horses while she was working the small patch of ground behind the cabin, turning soil that had been frozen hard only weeks before. Spring was trying. So was she. Her sleeves were rolled, hands dirty, breath steady. The sound stopped too close. She straightened slowly. 3 men sat their horses at the edge of the clearing. They were strangers, and not the right kind. Their coats were too clean, their horses too fine. Eastern stock, bred for show, not mountain work. The one in front smiled. "Afternoon," he said. "This the Mercer place?" "It is," she replied. "My husband isn't home." "That's all right," he said. "We're here for you." Her blood cooled. "I don't know you." He tipped his hat, smile sharpening. "Name's Hollis Crane, attorney for the Hale estate." The name landed hard. Behind him, a second man unfolded a paper. "Evelyn Hale, formerly of Virginia." "My name is Evelyn Mercer," she said evenly. The third man dismounted. He looked like the past had learned to walk again. Same mouth, same eyes, her knees locked. "You murdered my brother," he said flatly. Caleb came out of the trees before she could answer, rifle in hand, calm in his eyes. "Gentlemen," he said, "you've got about 10 seconds to turn around." Crane raised a placating hand. "Now, sir, let's not be hasty. We're here on legal business." "I don't see badges," Caleb replied. "I see trespassers." the brother sneered. "Ask her what she did." Quote, "Caleb didn't look at her. I don't need to." Crane stepped closer. "There's new testimony, a witness willing to speak. We're offering a chance to return quietly. Spare your husband embarrassment." "Get off my land," Caleb said. The brother leaned in. "She'll ruin you." Caleb smiled. It wasn't kind. "I've survived worse than words," he said. "You've got 5 seconds." They backed away, but the brother had one last shot. "This isn't over." Caleb lifted the rifle a fraction. "It is today." They rode off. Evelyn stood frozen until they were gone. Then she broke. He caught her before she hit the ground, holding her while the fear shook loose in sobs she'd never allowed before. "I thought I ran far enough," she whispered. "I thought." "You did," he said. They followed. That night, they didn't dance around it. She told him everything: the courtship, the marriage, the violence hidden behind doors that locked from the inside, the knife, the poker, the moment survival chose for her. "I'd do it again," she said quietly. He took her face in his hands. "So would I." Quote, "When he kissed her, it wasn't careful, it was fierce, honest, needed. They crossed a line neither pretended didn't matter." The fire burned low as they came together fully, scars mapped and accepted. Fear still hovered, but it no longer ruled. Morning brought smoke. Not from the stove, from the barn. Caleb woke to the smell and shouted her name. They burst through the door into a wall of heat and flame. The cabin roof was already burning. Sparks leapt into the sky like thrown stars. He dragged her away as the barn collapsed in a roar. Their home burned. Everything they'd built vanished in minutes. "This wasn't an accident," he said grimly. "No," she whispered. "It was a message." Neighbors arrived before dawn, men with rifles, women with blankets. No one asked questions. By noon, the ashes cooled, and in the wreckage, Evelyn found it. A gold watch. She knew it. "He wanted me to know," she said. Sheriff Langley arrived that afternoon. He took the watch carefully. "This helps," he said. "Arson's a hanging offense." Quote, "They slept that night under the stars, wrapped in borrowed blankets, Caleb standing watch with his rifle across his knees. 3 days later, word came. The men were caught trying to flee east. The hearing was set. The town packed the hall. Crane spoke first. Painted her as a predator. Painted Caleb as a fool. Then Evelyn stood. She did not hide the scar. She told the truth. The silence afterward was heavy. One woman stood. Then another. Stories spilled out. Bruises hidden. Doors locked. Fear learned it young. When the sheriff called the vote, the right side filled fast. Justice stayed west. That night, they held each other and breathed. "It's over," she said. "That part," he replied. Weeks passed. They rebuilt. Smaller, stronger. And when she told him about the child, he laughed and cried all at once. Life did not grow gentle. It grew real. One evening, as they sat on the new porch, watching the sun drop behind the ridge, Evelyn rested her hand over his. "I arrived here broken," she said, "but I stayed." "You arrived alive," he said. "That's what mattered." Quote, "In the valley below, lights flickered on, home reclaimed. And the ghosts, for once, stayed quiet. For now, rebuilding did not begin with hammers. It began with people. They came in wagons and on horseback, carrying lumber, tools, blankets, and food. Some arrived quietly, eyes down, leaving supplies without staying. Others came ready to work, sleeves rolled, mouths set with purpose. No one asked for explanations. No one needed them. By the second morning, the clearing no longer felt empty. Caleb moved through the work with a steady focus, directing where beams should go, lifting more than he should have, refusing rest. Evelyn watched him from the edge, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, gratitude and guilt tangling in her chest. "This shouldn't have happened," she said to Mrs. Alvarez, who was handing out bread. "It shouldn't have been done," the older woman corrected gently. Big difference. By nightfall, the outline of a new cabin stood, smaller, squarer, stronger, a shelter, not a memory. They slept again under the stars. This time, there were others nearby. The dark felt less sharp. On the third day, Sheriff Langley returned with news. "The men will stand trial here," he said. "The evidence is solid. Witnesses saw them drinking." Heard the threats. Evelyn closed her eyes, breath shuddering out. "They won't stop," she said. "Not easily." "No," the sheriff agreed. "But neither will this town." The words settled deep. Weeks passed. Spring pushed harder, snow retreated, green crept back into the land. The new cabin rose plank by plank, built by many hands. Evelyn worked alongside the women, sewing curtains from donated fabric, scrubbing salvaged cookware, planting a small garden near the door. Life insisted on itself. One evening, as they sat on the half-finished porch eating stew from tin bowls, Caleb watched her carefully. "You've been quiet," he said. She shrugged. "Just tired." "You don't tire easy." She smiled faintly. "Neither do you." Later that night, she woke with a hand pressed to her mouth, stomach turning. She slipped outside so she wouldn't wake him, breathing slow until it passed. The thought came uninvited. Hope. She did not say it aloud yet. The trial took place in a nearby town, crowded and hot, full of eyes hungry for spectacle. Evelyn stood straight, scar uncovered, voice steady. Caleb sat behind her, a presence she could feel without looking. When the verdict came back guilty, the room erupted, some in anger, some in relief. James Hale did not look at her as they took him away. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. On the ride home, silence settled between them. Not heavy, but thoughtful. "I thought I'd feel lighter," she said. "You do," Caleb replied. "You're just not empty." Summer followed. The garden took. The cabin filled. Gifts appeared. A rocking chair. A quilt stitched by many hands. A set of dishes mismatched but clean. One afternoon, Evelyn stood at the edge of the clearing, watching a woman with two small children being helped down from a wagon by Mrs. Alvarez. "They've nowhere to go," Mrs. Alvarez explained softly. "Her husband drinks. Worse." Evelyn felt something click into place. That night, she spoke. "What if we helped them?" she said carefully. "Not just her, others." Caleb listened, didn't interrupt. "A place to stay," she continued. "Temporary, safe, no questions they don't want to answer." He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "It would bring trouble." "It already has," she said gently, "but it would also bring purpose." He studied her face, the strength there, the fire tempered by compassion. "Then we do it right," he said, "careful, quiet." She reached for his hand. "Thank you." Late summer brought heat and thunder. One evening, after a long day, Evelyn sat on the bed, pale and shaking. Caleb knelt in front of her, fear sharp in his chest. "What is it?" quote. She swallowed, then smiled, small and sure. "I think," she said softly, "we're going to need a bigger cabin someday." It took him a moment. Then the world shifted. He laughed, a broken sound. Then pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "A child," he whispered, "ours." She nodded, tears finally spilling. Outside, rain began to fall. Steady. Promising. They stood together in the doorway of their rebuilt home, listening to it wash the dust from the land. The future waited, and this time they were ready to meet it. Autumn came early that year. It slipped down from the mountains on cool mornings and stayed late into the afternoons, turning the valley gold and red. Evelyn moved slower now, her hand often resting on her belly without thinking. The life growing there felt unreal some days, like a secret she was still learning how to carry. Caleb noticed everything. He noticed when she paused too long on the porch steps, when she stopped to catch her breath after hanging laundry, when the scent of frying pork made her turn pale. "You sit," he told her one morning, firm but gentle. "I've got it." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, sat. It was strange, letting herself be cared for. Haven, though they never called it that aloud, began quietly. A small cabin down the slope, built with leftover lumber and stubborn resolve. No sign, no announcement. Just a place where a woman could rest without fear. The first came with bruises hidden beneath a shawl and eyes that never stopped scanning doors. Evelyn made soup, asked no questions. That night, she lay awake beside Caleb, listening to the wind move through the trees. "What if this brings trouble again?" she whispered. He slid an arm around her. "Then trouble knows where to find us." Winter edged closer. Snow dusted the peaks. Smoke curled steady from chimneys now, 2 of them. The little refuge filled with quiet routines. Chores shared, meals eaten slowly, laughter, tentative at first, then real. Evelyn watched it all with something like awe. "I didn't know life could look like this," she admitted one evening. Caleb kissed her temple. "Neither did I." The letter arrived in late November, Eastern paper. Heavy seal. Evelyn knew before she opened it. She read in silence, hands trembling. Then folded it carefully and set it down. "What is it?" Caleb asked. "My past," she said. One last time. The Blackwood matriarch was dying, and she wanted to make amends. They came 2 weeks later, a carriage too fine for the road. An old woman dressed in black, eyes sharp but tired, a lawyer who spoke only when needed. Inside the cabin, the air felt tight. "I know what my sons were," the woman said finally. "I always did." Evelyn said nothing. "I want to leave my estate to your refuge," she continued. "All of it." Silence fell. "That money was made from cruelty," Evelyn said at last. "Yes," the woman replied. "Let it undo some." Conditions were set, names removed, distance promised. When the papers were signed, the old woman looked at Evelyn once more. "You survived them," she said quietly. "Yes," Evelyn replied, "and I chose what came after." The carriage left. The past went with it. December came hard and cold. Labor began on a night when snow fell thick and soundless. Caleb paced. The women took over. Hours stretched. Then a cry. Strong. Certain. "A girl," Mrs. Alvarez announced, smiling wide. "Healthy." Caleb sat beside the bed, tears streaking down a face he had once sworn would never soften. Evelyn held their daughter close. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." Quote. He touched the tiny hand, barely breathing. Spring would come again, and this time it would bring more than survival. It would bring a future, one they had chosen. Together. Hope arrived like the quietest kind of revolution. She grew fast through that first winter. Strong lungs, watchful eyes, a steady calm that surprised even the women who had delivered half the babies in the valley. Evelyn learned the weight of her daughter. In every way a body could learn something. Arms aching, heart stretched, sleep forgotten, and yet never missed. Caleb changed too. He spoke softer, moved slower, learned the shape of gentleness without losing the edge that had once kept him alive. When he held Hope, the world narrowed to the rise and fall of her tiny chest, the way her fingers curled around his calloused thumb like it belonged there. By spring, Haven was no longer a secret. Not entirely. Word moved the way it always did in the West. Quiet. Sideways. Woman to woman. Doctor to patient. A whisper passed with a loaf of bread or a length of cloth. Women came. Some stayed days. Some weeks. A few months. All left different than they arrived. Evelyn never asked for details unless they were offered. She understood that healing did not begin with confession. It began with safety. One afternoon she stood on the porch, Hope balanced against her hip, watching 2 women laugh together near the smaller cabin. One had arrived, barely able to meet anyone's eyes. Now she was planning a job in town, chin lifted, hands steady. "You did this," Caleb said quietly, stepping beside her. Evelyn shook her head. "They did. I just held the door open." Summer ripened the valley. The garden thrived. the refuge expanded by one more small cabin. Clara stayed on permanently, proving herself steady and capable, a quiet anchor for others who arrived shaking and unsure. The foundation paperwork was finalized in town under a name that carried no echoes of the past. Funds were dispersed carefully. Nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention. Just enough to keep the work going. One evening, as cicadas sang and Hope slept between them in a cradle Caleb had built with his own hands, Evelyn spoke into the dark. "Do you ever think about who we were before this?" Quote. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I think about who I thought I was," he said, "and how wrong I was." She smiled softly. "Me too." They did not pretend the ghosts were gone. Some nights still brought dreams. Some days still carried shadows. But the ghosts no longer ruled the house. They were acknowledged, named, and then set aside. In late August, a letter arrived from the territorial court. The appeal had been denied. James Hale would serve his full sentence. Evelyn read the words twice, then folded the paper and placed it in the fire. She watched it burn without ceremony. Caleb didn't ask how she felt. He knew. Autumn returned with color and clarity. The town that had once watched her with narrowed eyes now greeted her with nods and small smiles. Trust had been earned the only way it ever was, through fire, time, and showing up again and again. One afternoon, Reverend Collins passed her on the road. He tipped his hat, said nothing else. That was enough. On Hope's first birthday, neighbors gathered in the clearing. A simple cake, a handful of gifts. Laughter carried across the meadow. Evelyn watched her daughter take unsteady steps toward Caleb, who knelt with open arms. His face lit with a joy so unguarded it stole her breath. This, she thought, is what survival was for. That night, after the guests had gone and the stars returned, Evelyn stood at the window holding Hope, watching lamplight glow softly in the refuge cabins. "Someday," she said quietly, "she'll ask where she came from." Caleb wrapped an arm around both of them. "And you'll tell her?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "I'll tell her I was afraid, and that I chose not to run." Hope stirred, eyes fluttering open, gray and clear. "Welcome to the world," Evelyn whispered. "We made it better than we found it." Years later, people would speak of the place on the mountain where women could rest without fear. They would talk about the man who had once been dangerous and learned how to be kind, about the woman who arrived scarred and built something that outlived her pain. But on that night, there were no stories yet. Only a quiet cabin, a sleeping child, and two people who had ordered nothing more than survival and found themselves holding a future together.